Hi book lovers, welcome back to my channel. As you can tell from this title, we're gonna dive into some BookTok books today. If you know me, you know I am not on TikTok, which means I'm not on BookTok. I just have no interest in it right now. I did make myself an account and that's as far as I've gone, but I've been wanting to do a BookTok related video for a while. I mean, I'm not the first one to do this and I'm definitely not gonna be the last, but I finally sat myself down, made myself a TBR based on some popular BookTok romance books and read them. I chose books that were more recently released, authors that I hadn't really read before or heard about and weren't just like popular 5-10 years ago. So I went with 4 books by 4 different authors. 3 of them I had never read before, and the 4th one I didn't necessarily love but wanted to try it more from. I will say I'm like 99% sure that these books and these authors are popular on TikTok. If I'm wrong, forgive me. I have read some popular BookTok romances before, but most of them, I will say, did not turn out to be the best. So my experience with BookTok and basically like the trickle-down effect it has on Instagram and on YouTube, it hasn't really been the best. But for this video, I genuinely chose books that I wanted to give a fighting chance to, that I wanted to enjoy, that sounded good to me, that I had friends who had read them and loved them. So the 4 authors that I chose for this video were Cate Stewart, Lucy Score, Lauren Asher, and Sarah Cate. The only one that I had read of this list was Cate Stewart. The other 3 I'd never read before, and Lauren Asher and Sarah Cate were the ones that I hadn't even heard of until maybe a month or 2 ago. So I read 4 books by these 4 authors and it ended up being quite a mixed bag. I wouldn't say that I quite trust BookTok just yet, but I did enjoy half of them. The first book on this list that I read was Flock by Cate Stewart, which is the first book in her Ravenhood series. This one is the oldest release on this list, but it only came out in 2020, 2 years ago, and I had been wanting to read this one since it first came out and since it just blew up. I'm pretty sure it got popular before TikTok though, but TikTok definitely helped it grow too. But I had literally heard nothing but amazing things for this book, for this series, so I wanted to give it a try. And anyone who talks about this series always talks about how they sob and cry because of it. Unfortunately, I can't really vouch for how depressing this book gets or how sad it gets because I didn't really make it past the first book. I've been planning to read the whole trilogy because it follows the same heroine, but if you have watched my wrap up from like April, you might already know how much I did not like this book. I gave it 2 stars, and honestly the only reason that I didn't give it 1 was because I listened to the audiobook, and the audiobook, the narrators saved it for me. The duet narration here was fantastic. I just did not like the story or the characters. The main feeling that I had while I was listening to this one was annoyance, and it was 100% because of the heroes, our 2 heroes, who, by the way, spoiler alert, the heroine does not even end up with at the end of the trilogy. So it's a noodle romance set in this small town, Cecilia. She goes to live with her father, her estranged father, who is like a CEO in that small town, but kind of a terrible boss. She goes to work in her father's factory, and her coworker is Sean, our first hero. They connect and he kind of introduces her around town and brings her into his community, which is pretty small and also very secretive and mysterious. They keep a lot of secrets for some reason that you don't really find out until towards the end of the book, and even then it's like you don't really get the whole story. But he's a mysterious guy and it's very alluring for Cecilia, even though it got really annoying. And also Sean is like that weirdo who hates all technology, he hates social media, like it's evil, the government is tracking us, blah blah blah. It was just it was a paranoia that got really cringy to read about. One of Sean's friends is Dominic, our second hero. He is like the broody jerk of this group. Dominic has so much attitude for no reason that I could understand. He is so rude to Cecilia. So already from the beginning, I did not like this dude, and it didn't help that Sean and Dominic would just keep so many secrets from Cecilia, and I didn't understand why. They would kind of tease her about what they do in secret, but it just made me feel like they thought they were better than Cecilia, that they didn't think that she was good enough for them, that she wasn't good enough to learn the truth. So that was the most annoying thing for me while I was reading this one, how condescending they were towards Cecilia, and yet they still wanted her, they wanted her body, and had no problems sharing with each other. Though I will give props because the steam was fantastic. The writing was good too, but I just didn't really see the point of this first book when we barely get to find out any secrets, and I mean, the heroes aren't even the end game for Cecilia. They really just ruined this book for me. Sean was too paranoid, Dominic was a douche, and Cecilia let them walk all over her. So this book did not work for me. I even read spoilers for the rest of the series, and I know if I tried to read the second book, I would absolutely hate it. But if you do want to give this book a try, I would highly recommend the audiobook. That was the one good thing about this one. But otherwise, this popular BookTok book was a total fail for me. For my second book, I had to read Things We Never Got Over by Lucy Score because this book, and I mean this author, has been shoved into my face since January 2022. I didn't even realize how popular Lucy Score was, but people who read her and love her, they love her. And everyone was talking about how good Things We Never Got Over was, so I had to pick this one. I kind of debated between this one or By a Thread because one of my friends loves By a Thread and actually prefers that one over Things We Never Got Over. But I just went with Lucy Score's most popular book because this one has been on like the Amazon top 10 for weeks, consecutive weeks, even though it came out 6 months ago back in January. And you guys, this one totally lived up to the hype for me. I loved it. I give it 4 stars. It wasn't perfect. It did feel pretty long, and the ending, the drama at the ending was so dumb, but I had so much fun reading it. The writing was fantastic. It's like this fresh and fun small town romance, romantic comedy. It wasn't like a silly kind of romantic comedy. It still felt very grounded, but there's a lot of good banter, a lot of great chemistry between the main characters. The heroine was very adorable and endearing. The hero is a total grump. It's got very good Grumpy Sunshine vibes, and I absolutely see why now. So many people love this book and love Lucy Score. So Things We Never Got Over, this is the first standalone in the Knock 'Em Out series. Knock 'Em Out is the small town that the series is set in. We've got an older hero. I mean, he's not that old compared to the heroine, but he is in his 40s, his early 40s, and Knox is not happy when he sees Naomi rolling up into his town because he thinks that she's actually her twin sister, who is a total mess. Her twin always gets herself in trouble and never thinks about anyone but herself. So once again, Naomi has shown up to take care of her sister's mess. Mostly though, this sister was just an excuse for Naomi to leave her fiance at the altar. She ran away from her wedding, so she arrives in Knock 'Em Out only to realize that her sister is not there. Her sister actually stole her car, and she now has guardianship of her niece that she never even knew about. Naomi now is homeless, she's jobless, she has no money, and she has an 11-year-old to take care of who doesn't really know what to make of her. Luckily, Knox is here to help, albeit very, very reluctantly. He's very attracted to Naomi, but he refuses to ever get into a relationship with a woman again. So we've got a grumpy hero who can't stop inserting himself into Naomi's life because she needs all the help that she can get. Naomi is a tough cookie though. She is technically a damsel in distress because she doesn't have anything, but she doesn't act like a damsel in distress. I love the slowly growing relationship between Naomi and her niece Waylay, and the jealousy and possessiveness from Knox was fantastic. I love a good alpha hero. It wasn't anything too over the top, but it was nice to see Knox getting jealous and possessive over Naomi, especially when his brother flirts with her. Also, Knox's money stuff, his jobs, that was really interesting to read. He works as a barber part-time. I don't want to say too much about what he does, but it was interesting. It was my first time reading about a barber hero. The romance is slow burn. I wouldn't say it's Mariana Zapata level, but it is fairly slow. It takes its time to develop, though Knox's possessiveness does help it move it along. The ending with the drama and the sister was a little bit too much for me, but still, I love this one. I thought it was great. The writing is solid. I loved how much fun it was to read, from the storyline to the characters. Even the secondary characters were just as fleshed out as our main characters. If you love small town romances, I can see why Lucy Score is a must read now, because I definitely want to read more from her. Like, this book has a uniqueness to a typical small town romance. It doesn't feel too cliched or anything, and also the amount of steam was not disappointing. I'm just so glad that this one turned out to be as amazing as everyone said it was gonna be. I'm definitely gonna be reading more from her now. I'm most likely gonna read By a Thread because everyone that I know loves that one even more than Things We Never Got Over. But this is great if you love small town romances, Grumpy Sunshine, older heroes, older characters, slow burn, and romances with kids. My third BookTok romance was The Fine Print by Lauren Asher. I had actually never heard of Lauren Asher before until a couple months ago when this book was chosen for the Lift for Autism auction. This book was the book that was chosen to have an exclusive cover just for the Lift for Autism auction that's hosted by Kennedy Ryan and Emma Scott. I remember the book was a secret leading up to the auction, to the reveal, and Kennedy Ryan was hyping it up, being like, this is one of the most popular books on TikTok, one of the most popular authors on TikTok, and everyone's like, it's gotta be Colleen Hoover because she's like the biggest BookTok author. And much to my disappointment, it was The Fine Print by Lauren Asher, and I was like, what is this book? I've never seen it before. It did get a pretty special edition cover, but I was so confused about why this book got chosen. But apparently it's super popular on TikTok, so I had to include it in this video. I looked it up on Goodreads first though to see if it was worth reading because I had no idea what this book was going to be about. So I immediately went to see if Jessica from Peace Love Books and Lisa from Remarkably Lisa read it, and they did. I saw that Jessica loved it and Lisa hated it, so I thought that I would be the deciding factor for this book to unofficially decide if this book is good or not, if it's worth the hype. And typically, I usually vote towards Jessica. I rate similar things to her. But this time, I actually did not like this book. I gave it 2 stars, so I have to go with Lisa's rating on this. It was not a good book and such a chore to read for me. The premise did sound good though. It sounded fun and different. It's the first book in the Dreamland Billionaire series, and Dreamland is like a fictional Disneyland. Rowan, the hero, is one of the brothers who owns Dreamland, and he's been tasked by his late grandfather, there's Will, to be the new creative director. In order to get his inheritance, he has to create something new at Dreamland that gets passed by this voting board. This is when Zara, the heroine, comes in. She drunk applies for a creator position and actually gets it. This is her dream job. She's always wanted to create for Dreamland, but the only thing is that her boss, that Rowan, sucks. This book did sound good in theory. I mean, I'm not a Disneyland girl, but it was interesting to read about a fictional Disneyland in a book. But Zara and Rowan ruined this book for me. Zara and especially Rowan were just insufferable. So Rowan is written to be this cold, unfeeling, rich hero. He doesn't really care about his employees. He just cares about the bottom line, making money and getting his inheritance. But I think the author took this a little bit too much and too far because Rowan literally just came off as a robot for me. I got absolutely nothing from him. He was not likable. There was nothing redeeming about his character. I mean, I felt sad about what he had to deal with growing up with his abusive father, but it was really hard for me to sympathize with him. Usually I love these kind of cold heroes who are soft only for the heroine, but Rowan wasn't even soft for Zara, or at least I didn't feel it. Like, I genuinely didn't believe that he loved her. And then Zara was so all over the place. Her character was a mess. Anytime that she's with Rowan, she says and does these completely out of character things. Like, she stands up to him, mouths off at him, and she's not like that any other time. Like, the banter between them felt really forced and disingenuous. The writing was very bland, so sadly this book was just not executed well enough for me. I can see why people enjoy this one, but I could not get into it, and I honestly found myself skimming towards the end of the book because I just wanted to get it over with. So I gave it 2 stars. It was not for me, though I am a little curious about Rowan's brother, his oldest brother, I think, the one who has a secretary he may or may not be into. I'm not sure it's worth a read though, just because I've heard it's not as good as this first book, and I already didn't like this first book. So for my last read, my 4th and final book, I was really praying that this one would work out a lot better than the past 2 out of 3 books. I already had 2 stars, only 1 4-star, but thankfully Praise by Sarah Kate ended up being much better than my previous book. Okay, compared to The Fine Print, it was good. I didn't fully love it though. I'm torn between 3.5 to 4 stars. I kind of struggled with the pacing because there was a point like halfway through where I put Praise down and didn't get back to it until like 3 weeks later. It didn't really hook me, but it was still a solid read, especially if you want age gap, kink, an older hero, and a forbidden romance. It's an ex-boyfriend's dad kind of romance, and is it like the best ex-boyfriend's dad romance that I've ever read? No, but it was hot and it was fun to read. It was my first time trying Sarah Kate, and her writing was really good here. I would definitely read more from her. It had just the right amount of BDSM for me to enjoy it, and not too much that it took me out of the story. So Praise Praise is the first standalone in the Salacious Players Club, which is the hero sex club. He has a very broken relationship with his adult son because of this club, and then he ends up falling for his son's ex-girlfriend. Very forbidden, right? So Charlie, the heroine, she shows up at Emerson's house because she's supposed to get some money from her ex, but he told her to go to his dad's place to get it. So she shows up at Emerson's place, and Emerson mistakenly thinks that she's one of the subs that his friend sent over. He kind of accidentally unlocks this praise kink in Charlie, and that's how they first meet. Emerson finds out soon enough that she is not a sub, but actually his son's ex, and that she's kind of in need of some money, so he actually hires her as his assistant. It's an office romance, and it's probably my favorite part about this book, the whole forced proximity, the tension going on between them while they're at work. It doesn't really take too long though until they fall into bed together and Emerson takes Charlie to his club. I felt like it happened a little bit too fast for me. I kind of wanted a little bit more tension between them before they got together, but this just means more steam, right? I liked Emerson and Charlie. I thought they were good characters, though I wish Emerson's character was a bit more fleshed out because Charlie's was. Like, we got to know her whole family and everything, and that was really nice, but for Emerson, I felt like we only got the surface level of his character. So that's mostly the reason why I'm kind of torn between 3.5 to 4 stars. Like, it was still a solid read. I did really like it. I wanted a little bit more from it, especially after seeing like so many people love this one, so many of my friends loving this one, but it was still good, and I'm curious enough to maybe continue with the series, though it's not like high up on my TBR. But for my first Sarah Kate book, it worked, and it's definitely one of the better books in this book talk list. So those were the 4 books that I read for this book talk video. I'm still not like decided on whether to trust BookTok because half of the books I liked and half of them I did not. I am curious though if you've read any popular BookTok books that were worth the hype. I would love to hear more about them, and of course if you read any of these 4 books, let me know your thoughts. As always, thank you so much for watching, and I will see you all next time. Bye!